How does this apply to our, supposedly we're going to replace everybody in the SOC with agents?
We spend a lot of our time in the SOC doing manual tasks repetitively and trying to glue things together. We think of the SOC as, somebody detected something and then go fix it and maybe tell people about it. But it's much more than that. We're going to be up-leveling the entire suite of functions, the procedures, the processes. Everything is going to become that much deeper and better over time. And that's not to say that AI won't keep pushing the boundary, but heck, if we've got an opponent, we're in an arms race, and that means there's going to be plenty of jobs for a long time.
You're going to spy on your users and violate their privacy, but as you pointed out, you don't have to look at what they do with it, just that they're doing something with it.
Yeah, so Claude Shannon, a long time ago, came up with an information theory, and effectively it is telling information is really about, is there something different in a situation? It's related to the probability of something being there or not. The less likely something is, the more information you have in a system, is how he put it. In other words, it's the opposite of entropy. And so you can measure that without needing to know anything about it.
Welcome back to the Security Strategist podcast, your blueprint for evolving cybersecurity. My name is Richard Stiennon, and I'll be your host for this episode. I'm the Chief Research Analyst at IT Harvest, an author and a trusted advisor to vendors, VCs, and private equity firms. Today, I'm talking with Sam Curry, who's Chief Information Security Officer of Zscaler. We will discuss how the rise of agentic AI is impacting the cybersecurity industry. So we'll explore why we may need to move beyond traditional authentication and authorization to a new security model based on authenticity. So welcome, Sam.
Hey, Richard. Thank you.
Sam, it's been a circuitous route for you to this role. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Oh, my goodness. Circuitous is probably the right way to put it. But most of my career has been spent in cybersecurity companies in various functions, usually product security functions or engineering functions. So I've been a CTO, a CISO, and a chief product officer, but it's been an interesting ride. And I think we actually met each other back in the days when I was at RSA, when I was the CTO there, but also I was at Arbor Networks, Cyber Reason, CA, if you go far enough back, in McAfee. But I also teach at a number of institutions, and I'm a fellow at the National Security Institute. And it's been a good career. So in spite of the fact that we're constantly fighting and trying to, fix networks and make sure bad guys don't get away with stuff, it has been a good career with some great people.
Absolutely. And that's why I've been so anxious to talk to you, because I want to get your thoughts, because I think of you as a deep thinker. And here we are presented with a new world of AI. And AI, of course, is causing problems on the attack side. But I think more importantly to our discussion is, how are we going to use AI on the defensive side? Do you see the market splitting between, other things? Like there's other ways to use AI and agents. And we see a lot of talk about agents for personal use. But how do you see that market dividing around personal use agents and agents specifically for enterprises to use for security?
Absolutely. I think we're going to start to take for granted in the consumer world, there'll be a whole market of things that we do with them. They'll become extensions of ourselves in some ways. I mean, we as individuals have our lawyers, our accountants, the sphere of people that we work with in the carbon world. Now we're going to have silicon extensions of ourselves, and people that represent us. We'll almost have brokers and things like that, but they'll be working at a new pace and representing us. Now, whether or not they have certifications or not is a difficult thing to see. Do they act in a fiduciary way? Can they pass the bar or not? I don't think that's coming in the short term. That might be in the long term. We'll let our society sort that out. But within organizations, there are more complex tasks and processes and ways that we work together. And I think what you're going to see is very different, while the technology may have similar underpinnings, very different applications that they get put to. And we're going to see internal to organizations, still this argument about privacy happen. I think we should be concerned about it in personal lives, but it's going to be extremely important within organizations. So where does the information go, especially with publicly traded companies, especially with respect to IP? And in security, when do you or don't you have a breach? for instance. And when you're dealing with data, you could process information much faster to determine if you've had a breach or what patterns exist or what classes of information have potentially gone out or not. But do you do that in a private instance? Who's looking at the information? How does that bias large models, for instance? These are not trivial questions. And the agent part of that, when the AI has the ability to act, so it can, first of all, it can plan, it can design, it can take actions independently of you on your behalf. And that's a very different world than when you send it off to perform tasks. And that means we've sort of got a new entrant into the workforce, but it's not fully autonomous. And so this gives us an intermediate step between us and what most science fiction deals with and what most people think of when they think of AGI.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for the days of returns to having travel agents. And luckily it's got the same name. But it's like today, I used to know wealthy people that would just make one phone call and their week of travel was arranged for them by somebody who knew their preferences. And that's just so far away from most people's grasp. But it sure seems like we're close to being able to sign up for an AI travel agent.
By the way, it still works that way in some companies, right? You still have a travel desk that negotiates cheaper rates on behalf of the company. You open a ticket to get your flights handled and stuff like that. And it's not just because of your preferences. It's literally so that you can get the company rates at things, right? So that's just a side note, but it will be incredibly much more convenient rather than just, clicking on things and saying, although that's not to say that agentic AI can't be confused as readily with, say, silicon targeted phishing, but it will take your policies and your desires into account. And in theory, you will be able to get better designed and better executing AI as well. That'll go off and say, I know your preferences. I know where you want to go. I know where you want to be. I know what kind of room you want. Let me go find a better rate for you.
I have to interject because there used to be, and this before your time at Zscaler and before the IPO. So I was working on a big project with Jay Chaudhry, and there was one person who handled travel for the entire company. There were just under 1,000 employees at the time. Yeah. And he would handle 1,500 flight reservations and hotels a month. It was just phenomenal. And he just had everything in his head. He could just get you the flights you needed.
I'll tell you, we still have a travel department, but it's highly efficient. Some of those men and women are really, really good at what they do. I want to crack a joke right now, but I won't because they're just awesome. There's been a few times when they've changed things at the last minute and things. That one guy has built out and scaled quite an amazing department. But now the efficiency of the department means they're probably going to be able to spend more time, not just Zscaler, but like everywhere. They're going to be able to spend more time up-leveling the tasks that they do. So while the department won't necessarily grow, it'll become a more interesting job for people, I think. They'll be able to do things like check on status for you or work on alerts or work on automation and do more valuable functions to the company as part of the travel job and more interesting ones for career growth. And so hopefully new entry-level people will also get to do more interesting things. But this is how are we going to apply this stuff? Over time, it's going to change dramatically. What we want is less manual tasks, and what we want is more interesting tasks. The same is true in a cyber context, by the way.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. How does this apply to supposedly we're going to replace everybody in the SOC with agents?
Well, it's not quite that easy. And if you think about it, we spend a lot of our time in the SOC doing manual tasks repetitively and trying to glue things together. And when you actually manage to not think about the tools, your ability to perform the task radically improves, such that you start to think of better ways to do the task. And we have to do this precisely because what you opened with. We have an opponent who is forcing us to improve our game because their game's getting better, which means we have to do that just to stay in place. And there's no end of jobs to do. And the funny thing is, in our head, we think of the SOC as, oh, somebody detected something and then go fix it and maybe tell people about it. But it's much more than that. Right? There's an awful lot more that's done in not just an incident response cycle and detection, in the whole breadth of the job and the depth of the job. And as we do this, we're going to be up-leveling the entire suite of functions, the procedures, the processes. Everything is going to become that much deeper and better over time. And that's not to say that AI won't keep pushing the boundary, but heck, if we've got an opponent We're in an arms race, and that means there's going to be plenty of jobs for a long time.
No question, but how does, universities are really, really slow to respond to changes in the job market and demand. And over the last 10, 15 years, every small college university that I know of focuses on getting people through their certified ethical hacking certification or Security Plus. And then they expect those kids to be able to get jobs and presumably at tier one SOC level. Are those going to go away? And what should universities be doing to help skill them up for what they actually need to be doing?
So I've got some good news and bad news there. I actually teach at a couple of universities. The good news is they can be relevant still. The bad news is they're going to have to start to take a page out of the liberal arts. So the way that you're actually going to have to walk over to the philosophy department. They're probably going to have to walk over to the social sciences department. So they're going to have to understand ethics and logic in particular, because they're going to have to know how to work with AI and know, is what it's telling me logical? So you're going to have to know the principles of computer science, not just engineering, but computer science. I mean, Turing, really what he did was take mathematics and philosophy to come up with computer science, which is why we call it a science. But you want to make sure that the output actually obeys many of the principles of logic. Is what it's producing, do you suffer from leaky abstraction? Can you actually validate that it's giving you the best options? Are its conclusions correct? This is perhaps the purest form of computer science. And so you want to go back and say, well, let's work with the philosophy department. Let's work with the sociology department to understand impact on us as a group. And some of these softer sciences are actually really important going forward. We're going to have to double down on what the carbon-based things are trying to do to understand these carbon units called humans and our society at the intersection of us and silicon, and frankly, how the silicon, quote, societies start to emerge. Now, if that sounds a bit touchy-feely, it's not. So if you want to know how do we adapt with our AI partners in an adapting landscape of conflict, then we have to actually start thinking about it as a moving target, not just how do I, take Kali Linux off the shelf and take some tools and run it against someone and make sure it's ethical. What we have to do is understand when I ask an agent to go do something and it comes back, how do I do it in a way that it doesn't go into unethical areas? And how do I take the output and use it correctly? And am I sure that it did it right? These are different questions from just pure, can I code something, script something, compile it, and run it?
I look forward to that day.
It's kind of a renaissance, actually.
Renaissance.
What were liberal arts at one point. Yeah,
that's right. Renaissance, which of course included a vast divide between, the educated and the uneducated, who were the serfs, the labor for the educated. Wouldn't that be cool if we went back to a time like that? Only now the serfs are AIs, and it seems
what they can also help us do it. And here's the thing: many of us, by the way. Many people in the industry, they kind of embrace it. Many folks are saying, wow, I've always wanted to put these two parts of my life together. Others are like, well, I've always hated that side. So the good news is there's a path to relevance. The bad news is you may or may not be comfortable with it because it brings two dissonant or maybe disconnected parts together.
Let's change gears a little bit because I wanted to talk about something. I've heard you talk about using consumption metrics as a more powerful indicator of a product's value in the context of what we're talking about. How does that apply?
The question, I think, in some regards is, as I mentioned, part of my background was in product management and product direction and innovation, sometimes big, sometimes smaller companies. You always want to go to the customer. You always want to go to the practitioner and say, so what are you doing with it? But if you ask someone, are you happy? Everyone sort of wants to tell you yes. They either like you or they don't. And that's not very useful, right? So what you want to do is ask more pragmatic questions. You want to say things like, not are you happy or not? Would you use it? When would you use it? You want to get to, like, if you have a brand new product, you want to say to someone, I'm not asking you to buy it, but if you did buy it, when would you, and which budget would you take the money out of? You've got to have a trust relationship to get that one. You say, because what I want to do is find the market. Does this satisfy the pain enough that you would take the budget from somewhere to do something with it? That's a very telling question. So how do you infer that if you can't directly ask that question, especially if an existing install base and you're investing money in building something new? This is part of the innovator's dilemma. So what you do is you say, all right, what are they actually using or not using? And in fact, you can infer things like if a customer's happy, if they're leaning in. If you've got the back-end metrics, you don't need to know, for instance, anything to do with what they're using, but are they engaging with, and in fact, are they engaging with and using? And you can start to say, what is the complexity of a policy set without knowing any of the policies to see, are they actually writing policies? Are they actually growing it? Because if you've got, let's say, an area of your product that does, I don't know, content filtering, and let's say you've got another one that does access control. If they're not working on one or two of those, but they're really working on the other one, you're either learning a bias of the user, or you're learning that there's a problem or something really good with one or the other. But at scale, you can start to say, which parts are they engaging with and why? Which features do they use or not? That's far more interesting than just, do you like it? Because ultimately that's a do you like me or not question. What you want to do is get into, are they getting value from these features? And did I invest in R&D correctly? Or going forward, should I put more into that or not?
Cool. I like that. And you kind of implicitly answered my next question, which was, okay, you mean you're going to spy on your users and violate their privacy? But as you pointed out, you don't have to look at what they do with it, just that they're doing something with it.
Yeah. So Claude Shannon, a long time ago, came up with an information theory. And effectively, it is telling information is really about, is there something different in a situation? It's related to the probability of something being there or not. The less likely something is, the more information you have in a system, is how we put it. In other words, it's the opposite of entropy. And so you can measure that without needing to know anything about it. You can say, like what we do when we look at the stars and we look for those exoplanets and we say, is there life? What we're doing is to say, is something not what we expect? If so, there's information there. And then we drill in and go, well, what is it that's different? And we can do the same thing with a policy hive and go, is there information there? If there is, somebody's working on something or somebody's hacking something. By the way, these are much more interesting statistics. You can do this with risk. And in fact, I recently wrote about and will continue to write about how there should be, just as we have a least privilege philosophy with respect to entitlements, we have a least function with respect to applications and application stacks, there's probably a least information, and we use this in design, principle with respect to the state of information in a given system. So you can actually use this to say, where are the interesting things? Where is the risk? And where is the interest inside of a system on the part of the users, carbon or silicon based? And that's useful for designing better systems and to bring more tools to where they're needed.
Awesome. Take us back to Agentic AI. And, right now I think I cover 29 vendors of SOC automation, I call it. Most of them have chosen the agent path to do it. And they seem to be evolving a framework for how to do it, right? With a master agent that directs the specialist agents to do some task and then bring everything back together, make a decision, pass it off to the operations agent to actually get something done. Is that the way it's going to work? Or will there be an evolution beyond that? Will somebody come up with a different way to do it?
Almost certainly they'll come up with incremental innovations and some radically different ways of doing it and different kinds of agents. It's angels and demons, right? What we've got is effectively, I don't want to say it, well, I will say it, homunculi of some sort that are going off and doing stuff on our behalf. What we need to do, though, is to create boundaries for them to work with. They need to be going off. You mentioned authenticity at the start of this. We need to make sure that they are accountable and traceable back to someone, and authenticity checks are possible. We need to make sure that they have a statement of purpose when they take actions. Therefore, there has to be a system to go, okay, I'm recording that. And we talk about bill of materials with respect to software. We also need a bill of data to understand the provenance of the training for those. So now we've got authenticity, we've got statement of purpose, bill of materials, and bill of data. And now we can begin to put systems in place to say, let's do behavioral analysis on them. And when there are exceptions, we know when we have to throw off some sort of check to go back and make sure this is legitimate. Because what we care about is accountability and that it really is an extension of you. Because imagine if 3 of these agents go off and take actions that are at odds with one another. We want to know that. We don't even, as human beings, usually read EULAs, right? The end user license agreements. So we can't be checking everything. That would be a waste of time. It could be happening at a very high rate. But what we want is to know the exceptions, and we want to be able to avoid them from acting outside of certain boundaries or parameters that are policy driven. So how do we do that without knowing where they're going to go ahead of time? This is a big policy question, not just policy in the normal sense, but also policy in the execution sense. We want to give them those boundaries. And so that requires some kind of hub or some kind of switchboard or some kind of authority to do that, to check authenticity. It also requires the systems at the other end to be acting on them. It reminds me of the old policy enforcement and policy decision point kind of things that you can now embed in multiple places. So it's a new trust framework.
Seems like it's going to get complicated. So, Sam, if you had to summarize one key takeaway from our talk today, something for CISOs, CTOs, CIOs, what would it be and why?
I would say get curious. I mean, if you're talking to all these companies that are talking about agentic or whatever the new buzzword is, everybody wants in on it and everybody should be doing it. But the answer can't just be, hey, we're a bunch of really smart guys and gals, and we're just going to be here and solve everything for you. You should be asking the question of, how do you solve this traceability problem? How do you solve this behavioral analysis problem? What are the next two steps down the road? And we went from a world of authentication to a world of, we're now really in authorization. How do we get to a world of authenticity? And how do we really get the benefit of these things? And how are you going to up-level the jobs that are done so that we can do more valuable tasks at more scale? Because in a second-order chaos world where we have an opponent, we have no end of jobs. So how do they help you do those? Not the last war, the next one.
Wise words. Thank you so much, Sam, for joining us today. We had a great conversation. Also, thank you to everyone listening. We hope you had a lot to take away from this. And for further information on everything we've talked about, please head over to Zscaler.com. We'll be back next week with another episode of our podcast series. Until then, make sure you subscribe to this podcast on all major platforms and follow the conversation on our socials at EM360Tech on Twitter and LinkedIn. And for many more great daily content, head over to EM360Tech.com.